Hello everyone, I am Dr. Rakshita, Assistant Professor of Pathology. I will be discussing about an important topic related to prostate gland in this session, which is benign prostatic hyperplasia, also called as benign prostatic hypertrophy or BPH. Coming to the specific learning objectives, at the end of the session, you all must be able to understand the novel anatomy and histology of prostate gland, to describe the etiology and pathogenesis of benign prostatic hyperplasia, to describe the gross features of BPH, to describe the microscopic features of BPH, to mention the clinical features of BPH, and also you should be able to enlist the investigations for BPH. Let's begin with the anatomy of prostate gland. Prostate is an exocrine gland of the male reproductive system. It is a retroperitoneal organ which encircles the neck of bladder and urethra. It is ovoid in shape and it is about the size of a walnut, about 3 cm in length, 4 cm in width and 2 cm in depth. The prostate gland in the normal adult weighs approximately 18 to 20 grams. In this picture, we can see the prostate gland. It is located in the pelvis between the urinary bladder and the penis. The prostate is just in front of the rectum. The urethra runs through the center of the prostate from the urinary bladder to the penis, letting urine flow out of the body. The prostate secretes a fluid that nourishes and protects sperms. During ejaculation, the prostate squeezes this fluid into the urethra and it's expelled with sperm as semen. This is another picture showing the prostate gland located between the urinary bladder and the penis. So we can see the urethra running through the center of the prostate. So prostate gland has a base towards the urinary bladder and it has apex pointing down. And it has 4 surfaces, anterior surface, posterior surface and the 2 lateral surfaces. As I said in the previous slide, prostate gland has 4 surfaces. It has anterior surface, posterior surface and 2 lateral surfaces. Apart from this, the prostate can be subdivided in 2 ways, either by zone or by lobe. The lobe classification is more often used in anatomy, whereas this zone classification is more often used in pathology. So there are 5 lobes in prostate gland. We have anterior lobe, posterior lobe, right lateral lobe, left lateral lobe and median lobe. The 3 anatomic zones are transitional zone, central zone, peripheral zone. So apart from that, there is one more area called anterior fibromuscular zone or anterior fibromuscular stroma. So coming to the transition zone, it is the smallest of all the zones. It surrounds the proximal urethra. It corresponds to 5 to 10% of the total prostate gland. So here we have to remember, benign prostatic hyperplasia is most common in transition zone. Next we have central zone. This zone expands towards the base of the bladder and it is seen surrounding the ejaculatory ducts. It has the shape of a cone. It comprises 25% of the glandular tissue of the prostate. The peripheral zone, it is the largest zone which comprises 70% of the total prostate gland. It makes up the posterior and the lateral aspects of the prostate gland. Prostatic cancers are found in this zone. So apart from this, as I said, we have one more area called anterior fibromuscular zone or anterior fibromuscular stroma. This area is usually devoid of glandular components and it's composed of only muscle and fibrous tissue. So in this picture, you can see how the prostate gland has been subdivided into different zones. So the area which is labeled as CZ is the central zone. So it is seen surrounding the ejaculatory ducts. The area TZ, it is the transition zone which surrounds the proximal urethra. Then we have the area peripheral zone which is labeled as PZ. So it is the largest of all the zones, and it makes up most of the posterior and the lateral aspect of the prostate gland. So apart from this, we have anterior fibromuscular stroma, which is devoid of the glandular tissue. Now moving on to the normal histology of the prostate gland. Prostate is composed of glandular elements and fibromuscular stroma. The glandular elements comprises 70% of the total gland, and fibromuscular stroma accounts for 30% of the total prostate. The glandular elements are the tubulo-alveolar glands, and these glands are lined by two layers of epithelial cells. So there is a basal layer of low cuboidal cells, and above that there is a layer of secretory columnar cells. And these glandular epithelium are thrown into folds. They form infoldings. These glands are separated by thick fibromuscular septa, which contains abundant smooth muscle fibers and collagen fibers. This is the low par view of the normal prostate gland. So here we can see the prostatic glands, which are tubulo-alveolar glands, which are separated by fibromuscular stroma, which contains smooth muscle fibers and collagen fibers. So apart from that, inside the glands we can see there is presence of eosinophilic secretions called corpora amyloacea. This is the high par view of the normal prostatic gland. We can see the prostatic gland, which is lined by two layered cells. So the basal cells are cuboidal, and above that there is a layer of tall columnar cells, which are secretory. So in between these glands there is presence of the fibromuscular stroma, which contains collagen fibers and smooth muscle fibers. So apart from this, the prostate has numerous blood vessels and nerves. In addition to nervous control, prostate is an endocrine dependent organ, that is, it has hormonal responsiveness. So based on the hormonal responsiveness, prostate has two different parts. It has an inner periurethral part and outer subcapsular part. The inner periurethral part, it is sensitive to estrogen and androgen, whereas the outer subcapsular part is sensitive to androgen. So this is all about the normal anatomy and histology of the prostate gland. So now the prostate has three important pathologic processes involved. So there can be prostatitis, which is acute or chronic prostatitis. So apart from that, we have BPH, benign prostatic hyperplasia or benign prostatic hypertrophy, and different carcinomas can also arise from prostatic gland. So in this session, we'll be discussing about benign prostatic hyperplasia. It is also called as benign prostatic hypertrophy or BPH. BPH is an extremely common disorder in men aged 50 years and above. It is characterized by hyperplasia of prostatic stromal and epithelial cells with resultant enlargement of the prostatic gland. In some cases, large nodules may compress and narrow the urethral canal, which will cause obstruction of the urethra. So in this picture, we can see the normal prostatic gland, which is present at the base of the bladder. So the normal prostate will be smaller in size, and it will easily allow for the flow of urine. Whereas the second picture, you can see the prostate is enlarged in size. So this is a case of benign prostatic hyperplasia, and the prostate gland is enlarged to such an extent that it is causing obstruction to the flow of urine by compressing the urethra. Coming to the incidence of benign prostatic hyperplasia, it is seen in 20% of men by 40 years of age, and as the age increases, the incidence rate also goes on increasing. The incidence is 70% by 60 years of age, and it reaches 90% when the person ages 80 years and above. And it is seen that it appears a decade earlier in blacks compared to whites. Moving on to the etiology and pathogenesis. The main pathogenesis is related to the action of androgens. Excessive androgen dependent growth of stromal and glandular elements has a central role in benign prostatic hyperplasia. DHT, that is dihydrotestosterone, it is the ultimate mediator of this prostatic growth. This dihydrotestosterone is synthesized in the prostate from circulating testosterone by the action of enzyme 5-alpha reductase. So this enzyme 5-alpha reductase, it is located principally in the stromal cells. So this is the main site for the synthesis of dihydrotestosterone. This dihydrotestosterone can act in an autocrine fashion on the stromal cells where it is synthesized, or in a paracrine fashion on the epithelial cells. This dihydrotestosterone binds to the nuclear androgen receptors and regulates the expression of genes and signals the transcription of growth factors, which will support the growth and survival of prostatic epithelial and stromal cells. So although testosterone can also bind to the androgen receptors and stimulate the production of growth factors, this dihydrotestosterone is 10 times more potent than the testosterone. Apart from dihydrotestosterone, estrogen also plays an important role by rendering the cells more susceptible to the action of dihydrotestosterone. With aging, estradiol levels increases in men, which sensitizes the prostate gland to the growth promoting effects of DHT. So this is the reason that more incidence of BPH, that is benign prostatic hypertrophy, is more common in men over age of 40 years, because the estrogen levels will go on increasing, so that the more cells will be susceptible to the action of DHT, and thereby the chances of BPH also increases. The clinical symptoms of lower urinary tract obstruction, which is caused by the prostatic enlargement, may also be exacerbated by contraction of prostatic smooth muscle mediated by alpha-1 adrenergic receptors. So this is the picture showing the pathogenesis of benign prostatic hyperplasia. So here we have stromal cells, epithelial cells, and circulating testosterone. So this testosterone, it acts on the stromal cells and the epithelial cells. So in the stromal cells, so this testosterone is acted upon by the enzyme 5-alpha reductase, and this will convert testosterone to dihydrotestosterone. So this dihydrotestosterone, it binds to the nuclear androgen receptors, and it will regulate the expression of genes and signals the transcription of growth factors that will support the growth and survival of the prostatic epithelial and stromal cells. And in the epithelial cells, the testosterone can directly bind to the androgen receptors, and the same ways it lead to the transcription of growth factors, which will lead to the survival and the proliferation of the epithelial cells. So this is how the DHT, that is dihydrotestosterone, it is the main factor which is leading to the increased proliferation of epithelial and stromal cells. So here what we have to remember is estrogen is also an important hormone that will make these cells more susceptible to the action of dihydrotestosterone. Moving on to the morphology of benign prostatic hyperplasia, the gross features are as follows. The BPH virtually always occurs in the transition zone of the prostate. The external surface, the prostate gland is enlarged. It typically weighs between 60 to 100 grams, and it appears grey tan in color, and it is nodular. The cut section, the appearance will vary depending on whether the hyperplasia is predominantly of the glandular or the fibromuscular tissue. So in some cases there will be more glandular tissue hyperplasia. So in those cases, the tissue on cut section is yellow to pink, soft, honeycombed, and milky fluid will ooze out. And in cases where there is more of fibromuscular hypertrophy, so in such cases the cut surface is firm, homogeneous, and there will be no milky fluid extruding out. The urethra is usually compressed by the hyperplastic nodules into a narrow slit. This is the gross image of the prostatic gland in BPH. So here you can see on external examination the gland is enlarged. It is grey yellow in color and the surface is nodular. So this is the cut section of the gland. So here again you can see the gland is enlarged in size, and there is presence of well-defined nodules, and center we can see the urethra, which is compressed into a slit-like lumen. The cut section is grey tan in color. So this is one more picture, the gross image cut section of the prostate in BPH. So we can see the nodular enlargement of the prostatic gland. The gland is grey white in color with microcystic areas. On microscopic examination, what we see is hyperplasia of both glandular as well as fibromuscular stromal components. In few cases there will be more of glandular hyperplasia, whereas in few cases there will be more of fibromuscular stromal hyperplasia. But in most of the cases, predominantly what you see is glandular hyperplasia. In these cases, there will be increased in the number of glands, and these glands will show exaggerated intra-acinar papillary infoldings, and these glands will be lined by two layers of cells. That is, it will have an inner tall columnar mucus secreting cell and an outer layer of cuboidal to flattened epithelial cells, and these glands will contain a proteinaceous secretory material known as corpora amylacea in the lumen. And in few cases, as I said, there will be more of fibromuscular hyperplasia. So when this fibromuscular hyperplasia is present as a dominant component, what we see is aggregates of more spindle cells in between the glands, and also there will be foci of lymphocytic aggregates, areas of infarction, corpora amylacea, and a few foci will show squamous metaplasia as a feature. So these are all the microscopic features which we can expect in BPH. So this is a microscopic image, LOPA view, showing the nodule which has both epithelial and stromal hyperplasia. So here you can see there is increase in the number of glands, and these glands are showing papillary infoldings, and also in between the glands there is more of stromal hyperplasia also. So we can see both there is hyperplasia of stromal elements as well as epithelial component. This is another microscopic image, hyper view, which shows the glands and the fibromuscular stroma. Here you can see the glands which are lined by two layers of cells. There is a outer layer of flattened epithelium and an inner layer of tall columnar epithelial cells which are mucus secreting. And these glands, we can see they are thrown into papillary infoldings. And in the center there is presence of corpora amylacea in the lumen. And the fibromuscular stroma is also seen, which is increased. So this is a case of BPH. This is another microscopic image, hyper view. Here you can see there is increase in the number of glands, and these glands are lined by two layers of cells. So you can see there is a basally placed flattened epithelial cells, and towards the lumen there is tall columnar mucus secreting cells, and in one of the glands we can see the presence of corpora amylacea, and these glands there is exaggerated papillary infoldings, and in between these glands there is presence of fibromuscular stromal hyperplasia also. So all these are the microscopic features of a case of BPH, and these are very important, especially the lining of the cells, the glands. These glands are lined by two layers of cells. So this is very important. Why it is very important? Because we can differentiate a case of BPH from a case of prostatic adenocarcinoma just by looking at the lining of these glands. So in BPH, as I already told, these glands are lined by two layers of cells, whereas if it is a case of any carcinoma, prostatic adenocarcinoma, then those glands will be lined by just a single layer of cells. It will not have two layers. There will be presence of only a single layer of epithelial cells, and these epithelial cells will show nuclear pleomorphism. So there will be nuclear enlargement, hyperchromasia will be present, and there will be prominent nucleoli, and the cytoplasm will be finely granular, or in some cases it can be clear or foamy. So this is very important. These features will be seen only in prostatic adenocarcinoma, not in the case of BPH. So what you have to remember is the lining here. If it is two layered, it is present in BPH. If it is a single layer, then it may be a case of prostatic adenocarcinoma. And looking at the features like pleomorphism, you can really differentiate the two cases. So keep in mind the two cell lining in a case of BPH. Moving on to the clinical features, we already have learnt that BPH involves the transition zone which is present just around the urethra. So whenever there is enlargement of the prostate gland, this will compress upon the urethra, so causing obstruction to the flow of urine. So what we can expect, the clinical features will be due to the obstruction of the urine flow. So there will be urine hesitancy, that is difficulty in starting the stream of the urine, intermittent interruption of the urinary stream while voiding, post-void dribbling will be present, urinary urgency can be present, increased urine frequency, and also nocturia. So these are the very common features which the patients will present with in a case of BPH. Few patients may also present with features of urinary tract infection. This is because in BPH we know that the glands will be increased in size, so these glands will compress upon the urethra, which will cause obstruction to the flow of urine. So because of this obstruction, there will be presence of some residual urine in the bladder, so this will increase the risk of UTI. So the patient may present with burning micturition, difficulty or painful micturition, and also hematuria, which are the symptoms of UTI. Apart from this, the patients may also present with hydronephrosis. In some affected men, BPH will lead to complete urinary obstruction. So because of this, there will be painful distension of the bladder, and if there is absence of appropriate treatment, hydronephrosis can also occur in a patient of BPH. Moving on to the investigations. So even before lab investigations are done, so during the physical examination of the patient, digital rectal examination can be done. So this itself will help in the diagnosis of BPH. Enlarged prostate gland can be palpated during this digital rectal examination. So the investigations required for a case of BPH, apart from the routine CBC, are we have urine analysis. So with this includes urine microscopy, urine culture and sensitivity if we are suspecting UTI, that is urinary tract infection. Urine cytology can be done to exclude prostatic adenocarcinoma. Then ultrasound scan of the kidney, ureter, bladder can be done. So in this, the exact size of the prostate can be noted on ultrasound examination. And apart from that, we can also get an idea about the post-voidal residual urine. So this will tell us how much is the obstruction to the urine flow. Then we have uroflowmetry. It is the electronic recording of urinary flow rate throughout the course of micturition. So when the maximum urine flow rate is less than 15 ml per second, obstruction to the urine flow is suspected in uroflowmetry. So apart from that, we have serum PSA, that is prostate specific antigen. So even this is done to rule out the possibility of prostatic adenocarcinoma. So we have to know a little bit about this prostate specific antigen. So this PSA, it is a tumor marker which is used for screening of carcinoma prostate. So it is considered optional, but most of the physician will include it in the initial evaluation. So this PSA, it is a glycoprotein enzyme. It is secreted by the epithelial tissue of the prostate. It circulates in serum in both free and bound form. So the normal value, we'll have to remember, it will be less than 4 nanogram per ml, and its level increases with increase in the size of the prostate gland and also with increasing age. The level usually raises. It is not a specific marker for carcinoma prostate because there are different causes where this PSA can be raised. Like we have the common causes, the carcinoma prostate, it will be increased. Apart from that, even in BPH, in a case of BPH, PSA is increased. Then we have prostatitis. any instrumentation which is done can also lead to increase in PSA, and even a simple digital rectal examination which is done can itself lead to increase PSA and increase age and during ejaculation. So in all these causes the PSA level increases. Few words about the treatment of BPH. In cases where the symptoms are mild, usually medical treatment is given. In cases where there is a severe symptoms, surgical treatment is indicated. So medical treatment, it is the initial treatment. So using therapeutic agents, drugs like finasteride, which inhibits the formation of dihydrotestosterone, can be given, or drugs that relax the smooth muscle by blocking alpha adrenergic blockers like Flomax is usually given in medical treatment. So apart from this, in severely symptomatic cases who are not responding to medical treatment, surgical treatment is given. So this includes endoscopic method like TURP, that is transurethral resection of prostate. So in this, the prostatic chips which are removed during the procedure will be sent to the pathology department for confirmation of diagnosis. So also we have to rule out if there is any foci of carcinoma during our reporting. So this TURP is still considered the gold standard for this BPH treatment, transurethral resection of prostate. So apart from TURP, we have other procedures like transurethral incision of prostate, transurethral ultrasound guided laser induced prostatectomy, that is TULIP. So these are the endoscopic methods. So if the prostate gland is very much enlarged, then open method of resection can be done. So in this we have retropubic prostatectomy, perineal prostatectomy and transvesical prostatectomy. So depending on the individual patient, so different surgeries can be considered. So apart from this, we also have laparoscopic prostatectomy method using laparoscopic method. So this is about the treatment of BPH. So finally, to summarize what we have learnt in this session, in normal anatomy we saw that the BPH is more common in transition zone, whereas prostatic cancers are more common in the peripheral zone. Etiology and pathogenesis: dihydrotestosterone is the ultimate mediator of the prostatic growth, whereas estrogen also plays an important role by rendering the cells more susceptible to the action of dihydrotestosterone. In gross features, we saw that the prostate gland is enlarged, weighs between 60 to 100 grams, and it will have grey tan to nodular surface. The cut section in glandular BPH, it is yellow pink, soft, honeycombed with milky fluid oozing out, whereas in fibromuscular BPH, it will be firm and homogeneous in appearance. Microscopic features, we saw that there will be hyperplasia of both glandular as well as fibromuscular stromal components. The glands are lined by 2 layers of epithelial cells, and there will be papillary infoldings with the lumen containing corpora amyloacea. Clinical features, there will be obstructive symptoms like urinary hesitancy, post-void dribbling, urinary urgency, increased urine frequency, nocturia, hematuria and burning maturation. And in investigations, we saw that even digital rectal examination is very useful. Then we have urine analysis, ultrasound of the kidney ureter bladder with prostate, uroflowmetry, and also serum PSA can be done in the investigations for BPH. Thank you all.